Great, fantastic. Today is March the 27th in 2026, and my guest is Tim Urban. Tim is the guy behind Wait But Why, where you can get an 80-page deep dive on Neuralink illustrated entirely by stick figures, among other things. Also, one of the most read blogs on the internet. Also had the most watched TED Talk of all time, at least sometime or still.
I think it's second most. Unfortunately,
nice.
Annoys me.
Okay, so we got to get another one out.
Come on,
Yeah. So these days he's obsessed with the big picture, especially how we can use first principles thinking to fix society and eventually solve death. So two things that we care about a lot on this show. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show, but also here.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about that and about where we're at and what we're doing. But for regular listeners of the show, you know where we're at. But Tim, first of all, what can you reveal so far about the new book that you're writing? And what are the things or the chapters that you think most about right now when writing it?
So it's a book about everything. It goes from the Big Bang to the end of the universe. And I go chronologically, so we try to cover everything. And I hit the present about 2/3 of the way through, and then the rest of it is about the future. And for the past, you can research, you read historians, about what you can use historians, paleontologists, archaeologists, astronomers, biologists, evolutionary. There's a big crew of scientists that will tell you what happened, or at least the best picture of what we think happened. And it's still a lot to go through, and you'd actually be surprised how much disagreement there is and how quickly our picture of the past changes too. Just from the time I started writing to now, it's new theories have come out, other things have been debunked, but the future is even harder because there's no one to help you. The best you can do is there are no experts on the future. I don't think anyone knows. People can take guesses, but there are experts on the present. If you look at conventional wisdom, you're going to see a lot of what you're really going to see is a reflection of the values and lessons of the past, because it's slow, conventional wisdom. It's always lagging behind, especially when things are changing really quickly like they are now. So actually seeing the present is hard to do. And the people that are going to, I think, be best at seeing the present are going to be the people building it, the scientists, the technologists, the tech CEOs, the engineers that are working on the cutting edge things that will define the future. So I basically just interviewed a ton of them, including you. You were one of my people I interviewed. Because I both interviewed real experts, and then I also tried to interview people like you who see a broad swath of what's going on. So you have an elevated view, even though maybe you're not a specific expert in one of the sciences. And so it was a nice mix, and it was really fun. And by looking at the present and getting the predictions of the people who you talk to, you can start to at least paint a picture of the future. Much of it will be wrong, but you can try to do it. You can try and at least give people an idea of one vision of the future. And I tried to do both a positive and a negative version so we could see both what we could have and then also how bad things could get. And as far as what I'm thinking about most, it's whatever I'm working on last. So I did the whole thing, went from the Big Bang to the end. I wrote the first draft, and I had to go back and do a big fact check and revision and cut a bunch. So I went back again, and now I'm doing all the illustrations. Like you said, I do a lot of stick figures and other diagrams and maps.
So you write everything first, and then you do the illustrations?
Yeah, I write, then I try to do a second draft, because I don't want to draw 30 illustrations for a section that gets cut. So I want to make sure I have it pretty, but you can't go all the way to the end, because putting the illustrations in is when you can actually see what you have here. And now you need to do another revision. So I feel like in between the second draft and the third draft is the time. And the third draft will be my final draft. So that's next. So I'm in the middle of illustrations now, but it's interesting for me because I went from, my brain, was focused on the Big Bang, and I went all the way to the end. And then I went back again as I'm revising. So I'm just continually you ask me 1 month and I'll just be focused on the, ancient Assyria, the Neo-Assyrian Empire and what they were doing and why they were important. And the next month I'll be, looking at the age of exploration and or the digital age and the invention of the integrated circuit. And then the next month I'm focusing on longevity long shots and artificial superintelligence and when the sun will eventually subsume the earth in 5 billion years. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a very fun book to write. It's interesting that you talk directly to these inventors and scientists that are at the frontier at each of these disciplines, because I think a lot of people would look at the economists or the experts that sit in academia or the ones, financial institutions that write forecasts or think tanks and things like that. Does it play a role as well in how you look at potential futures, or how would you disambiguate between those?
Yeah. So you can't focus on everything in the future, obviously. I just focused on what I think is both most interesting to me and also what I think is going to drive things more than anything, which is technology. So like you could focus on the future of government and governance. For a post in a different time, I would write about what, Prosper is doing and how it can be a new form of a new mechanism to experiment with sovereignty and with laws and with regulations. But for this book, I would focus more on what Infinita City is doing within Prosper, because that to me is I think if I went 50 years in the future, my first questions as I got out of the time machine would not be what's going on with the how are people governed and what's going on with the economics, even though that's super interesting. But I would just first be like, what's the lifespan of people right now? Are we safe from bioweapons? Is AI ruling the world, or did we end up along for the ride? I mean, that is. Are we even still here? Mm-hmm. Have we totally ascended to some utopia? Are we all living in a virtual world? So to me, that's like as technology gets more and more powerful, it becomes more and more the topic. Now, I will say I got some feedback on my first draft, and one of the things that I heard was, talking to the technologists and the scientists, especially the technologists, you're going to hear a very bullish, optimistic view, which is great. I prefer that. And honestly, there's so much doomsday discussion and so many dystopian sci-fi novels. I think it's worth, let's play it out if this goes great. So I do that. I then also do a really bad story, but they basically said, some of the feedback was you need more, you need to balance it with some skepticism. So I am actually doing a round of interviews with academics who I think are more able to maybe present the downsides. And I think you want to paint the whole picture. So I'm going to do some of that in my next round.
And how do you disambiguate between technology that is kind of in scaling and technology that didn't yet have something like a ChatGPT moment? So I'm thinking of AI, for example, right now. Right now, it's in the hands of tens of millions of people that are using it. So we can see where this is going, right? We can extrapolate. But then there's other things like, these new governance models or cities or even life extension and longevity that doesn't have that yet. So it's people trying out various things, but we don't know yet what works or when something works or when there's a breakthrough, right? So how do you disambiguate those? And I'm also curious if you think, related to that question, in what ways is technology and progress inevitable or part of human evolution? So for example, there was a time when it wasn't entirely certain if the internet would happen. It was like the early 1990s and Bill Gates making some key decisions to sort of not have liability for content that you put up, for example. Otherwise, it could have been extremely overregulated and not as widely in use. And then there's other technologies like nuclear power that's basically just been outregulated, even though it could really power very cheap energy today.
Yeah, I think it's because if you just zoom out, it's like technology's gotten better and better. It feels like it's this force of nature that just happens. And that's really not true. Look at the moon landing. I mean, that was an example of if there hadn't been a Cold War, we would not have been to the moon yet. And you never know, but it seems like we probably wouldn't have been there yet. And there was a moment when, out of international fear and pressure, the U.S. said, "Let's ramp up to 10," and boom, like a century of progress happened in like 7 years. So I think you can see when there's some force that lines minds up in the same direction and puts money behind it and puts urgency behind it. Like, we can do anything, you know. I mean, really, we're very, very impressive when we get into that zone. Also, an industry can just completely stall for 50 years and nothing happens. So you talked about nuclear. I mean, fusion, I think $7 billion has been put into fusion or something like that. I mean, this is a technology that when it gets there, if it gets there, you can just essentially energy is free. It might as well be, because 1 barrel of water provides the same amount of energy through fusion that 750 barrels of oil do. 1 barrel of water powers 50 homes for a year. We have a lot of water, right? And so that's an example of, like, if we just if in, you know, there was some kind of Cold War, we had to figure out fusion, I think we would have it. We would be 10,000 fusion plants in a decade if we wanted to. So you can do example after example. Now, sometimes, of course, the free market takes over, and now it does feel like it has a life of its own. But to get there, something has to happen ahead of time. So longevity is an area where I get very frustrated, because there are forces pushing for certain diseases to be cured, for general health span increases. And that's great. And even that's not as efficient as it could be. There are things that slow it down, but like long-term, like moonshot longevity, it's just, we're doing the opposite of the space race with it, right? I mean, what if it was somehow a space race where China and the US were competing for existential, you know, it felt like it was existentially important to see who could extend double lifespan first. I mean, I don't know if they would actually do it, but man, we would see some progress. And there were tens of millions of the smartest people and tens of billions of dollars all put towards this. I mean, imagine. So I do think that that what will happen is in our hands, and it depends on the way we steer the ship. So I forget your first question, but that was
yeah. It's kind of, but I feel like the urgency point that you made, right? So we're not just, so when we get rich, then we also get lazy very often, and we have institutional sclerosis, and we do things through bureaucracies. But on the other hand, it's also not true that, you know, you really need like hard times and suffer to have like any urgency to do something. Otherwise, you know, much of Africa would be in the frontier of technological innovation.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm kind of trying to think, what are the conditions for technological progress, and what's kind of because you've been thinking of the timeline of human history. Does it have a starting point? Does it have a point where it really accelerates or compounds? Like, we talk a lot about the Industrial Revolution and the growth curves that we've seen since and before humanity was in poverty. Sort of, do you have a thesis on how technological change starts and lasts, and whether it's inevitable or not? Or could we also just go back to times where we don't make a lot of progress?
Yeah, I think, it's like the story of technology, really. If you open the book, page 1, I mean, you go back way before Homo sapiens were here, even before Homo, erectus and Homo habilis were here. You go back to Australopithecus, who started using stone tools, and not just, not just, other animals use hard stones for something, but you can give a monkey, a sharp rock and a dull rock, and it will use the sharp rock more because it realizes it's more useful, but it won't understand why. It won't understand the concept of sharpness, which is an abstract thought that it can't have. So you go back to pre-humans, but on the way to being humans, these creatures, and they began to actually intentionally sharpen rocks, just chip flakes off them. So that's the beginning. That's the first. But if you think about how amazing technology, the concept is, I mean, humans have pretty lame fingernails, right? And you have a fist, but it's it can hurt yourself if you pick up a rock, and suddenly you have this sharp claw, this hard, sharp claw that is just, it might as well be part of your hand for that moment. Then you put it down. It's not part of your hand anymore. You pick up a spear, you can throw it. You're an animal that can fire sharp projectiles. I mean, what an amazing, imagine if, some animal in the wild could just fire a spear out of its mouth at you. I mean, that's essentially what humans become. So then, of course, you start riding horses, and now humans can go as fast as horses, and you can just go on and on with its superpowers. But it goes very slowly. I mean, if you look back, I'm talking about the first stone tools 3.3 3 or 4 million years ago. 3 million years ago. And for a million years, maybe the hand axes get a little bit sharper. I mean, that is slow. And so then, of course, you have some kind of cognitive revolution when we become behaviorally modern, and you start to see we can now talk to each other about sharpness. We can actually start communicating and sharing ideas. And this tribe does it this way. Now we can all suddenly teach each other about it because we have this, so it starts speeding up. But what, there's kind of a theory that there's a certain correct level of difficulty. There's a sweet spot of difficulty, environmental difficulty, that produces the fastest technological change. So when things are too easy, when the weather's too good and, whatever, there's lots of food around, there's just no reason why change anything. You're surviving. When things are too hard, like the Ice Age, you're just trying to survive. There's no ability to innovate. You have to just try to get by, like in the worst part of the Ice Age and 20,000 years ago. But then there's the sweet spot, just coming out of this Ice Age, for example, or more recently, you have the first farming was developed above Mesopotamia, in these hilly flanks in modern day Turkey and Iran, but because there was rainfall there. So it's kind of easy mode because rain fell and you could just grow crops. Out in the desert in Saudi Arabia or wherever, there's, outside the Nile and Egypt, there's no farming, there's no innovation. So in both places, you don't really have that much innovation. But in the plains of Mesopotamia below, when you have just the Tigris and Euphrates River, but there's not much rainfall. But you have water, but it's not where you want it to be. You want water here, but there's no rain. You need to figure out how to do it. You start irrigation. From irrigation, you start to need governing structures to organize in a large scale. We need to cooperate in a big scale. You didn't need that in the hilly flanks where you have your little farming village and everyone farms their own food. We need to cooperate more because this is hard. It's too hard to do alone. But it's not so hard that we can't do it. We have the rivers. We have some fertile soil here. We actually can do this if we cooperate. That's the sweet spot. And now you have the first cities there, not above, in the best conditions. This was the plains of Mesopotamia where the first cities, Uruk and Ur, were built. The first writing was built. Civilization started there. That was the boonies early on. The people who left the best land and went out to, there's more land down there, but it's shitty land. There's no rain down there, and that's where things started. So you can apply that to today. You can think about are conditions right for innovation, where it's you need to work together in some way. You need to come up with solutions because it's not going to happen by itself. But there's not so much. The equivalent of the desert there is probably overregulated environment or a corrupt government, where you're always paying bribes. Or you can't get anything. You can't start a business. So that's like the desert. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Yeah. Tails? Can you reduce the cold a bit? It's a bit freezing, right?
Oh yeah, I'm okay. Whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm wondering what you think. So in my view, technological progress is linked to society in important ways, and you also wrote about what's wrong with society and how it's broken. And to me, these two relate. So. Yesterday, we had a talk by Thomas Boello, who talked about how different technological waves in history really changed the power structure of society, right? So the printing press enabled basically the Reformation over the Catholic Church, and like gunpowder basically ended the Middle Ages, right? Because you could basically the walls were not resisting it any longer. And sort of any means of communication, and now with crypto and the financial system, new technology can often change the existing power structure, which is often why the existing power structure fights back, right? So with like the old mainstream media, for example, against new and social media and things like that. So I'm wondering if you see kind of a connection between those two, or if you can talk a bit about your views on what's broken with society and what we need to, how we fix things to get what we want from technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think part of it is finding, a sweet spot between too much regulation and not enough. With something like AI, you don't want no regulation. With something like biotech,
But regulation by whom?
well, I think that's a question. I think what you don't want just pure, pure capitalist incentive to increase profit, which is a great motive in lots of cases. That just that motive alone can improve the world in so many areas, and it has. But with a technology that's super dangerous to the public safety, I don't think you just want pure, just let the companies fight each other for profit, and it'll end up for the best for the common good. Of course, you also don't want, in AI safety is a whole other can of worms. It's very complicated because also, this power could be more powerful than the government.
Yeah.
Who should hold that? Do we want the government holding that kind of power? Probably not. Do we want companies holding that kind of power? Maybe not. Do you want to decentralize? Well, now you might have, terrorists holding it.
I would also say the most risky things are actually government empowered with the most powerful technology. In the
Maybe.
world. The wedge wars. It's not,
Maybe, although super decentralized, where terrorists can create bioweapons. We don't want that either. So it is, I don't think there's this, I do not have the answer to. I can present all the different options, and the challenge is to find some right balance. But I think, I think there's also just an element of in terms of what creates the what moves things forward in the best way. So that most industries are not such a great threat to public safety, like, fusion or something. Transportation. I want supersonic jets, right? Why did we stop those? I mean, we have answers to that now, but why? And now I want cultivated meat. So I want cultivated meat to spare animals' lives and also give us great tasting, healthy meat. There's lots of examples of things where I just want to move forward at the maximum pace. So I think, one of the things that gets in the way can be obviously entrenched power. Like you said, cultivated meat is going to make a lot of enemies, right? Big meat is not going to like that. Just like Tesla had to fight through all kinds of battles from oil and gas. And that's an example, by the way. If not for one guy, Elon, we might not have electric cars right now at all. We didn't. We that technology existed in 1903. Electric cars, it disappeared, and it took someone who could really fight through a bunch of entrenched interest and build something so good that it was. And now, of course, electric cars are everywhere. They're going to become more common than gas cars soon enough. So I think, first of all, just the ability of there's certain industries where the entrenched interest can basically keep out competition. And there's other ones where they really can't very easily. So I think that's one factor. Another factor is also just cultural. I mean, America is better than other countries culturally for technological progress because there's not much of a tall poppy syndrome. People say success is good. Look at this person. They built a company. They became a billionaire. Good for them. Right. In other countries, I think it's maybe frowned upon, and that person needs to be quiet about what they've done. That's the tall poppy syndrome of the tall poppy gets cut in other countries. But I worry about the U.S. losing that a little bit. I think the last 10 years, the idea that I think that the kind of fringe leftist idea that, billionaires were inherently evil. There's no such thing as an ethical billionaire. It's inherently done through exploitation, which I don't believe. I think a lot of the people who are billionaires is because they've helped a billion people in the world. But I think that has spread from more fringe into kind of more mainstream, left-wing opinion. So that's an example of, if that shifts a little bit, fewer people maybe will try to build something really big because it won't be, it won't be rewarded culturally. And we are driven a lot by what will make us popular. As much as we are by money and as much as we are by doing something good for the world, people want to be praised and not hated. Some people don't care. Some people, that's not a driver for them at all. But for a lot of people, it is. You'll have fewer young people going into industries that could do something really big because it's thought of as kind of being part of this evil system of, So, we could go on for, there's so many different factors. I think each industry is different. But yeah, the more you dig in, the more you just realize how many different levers can be pulled here that change things, and it's no automatic situation moving forward.
Yeah. And maybe you can talk a bit more about the thesis of the book. What's our problem, and sort of how we are sort of what makes high rung and low rung in how we think about the world and how we're seeking truth versus just fighting tribal warfare.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of like two minds in every head, and one is very ancient, kind of automated software, which it was programmed to be was programmed for it's a ancient survival handbook. Basically, it's an ancient survival software, and that software wants us to doesn't realize that what the modern world is, and thinks we're all still in a tribe, and you better be cool in the tribe, and you better be on the inn, and you want status within the tribe. And what mattered in that world was not being an independent thinker. It was conforming with what do we think? Okay, that's what I think. And what we think is who we are. It's all the same. What we believe, the gods we believe in, or that we hate that other tribe, or that we believe this about the origin of Earth. That is who we are. And if you don't believe that, you're out of the tribe. Oof, that's the scariest thing in the world. So for that mind, you very much want to just conform and you identify with your ideas, and you will get, and it doesn't produce great thinking, to say the least. Then there's these other mind. I mean, I think, it's impressive that we have this other mind that can override the first one, which I call like the higher mind. It's a mind that can see the real reality of today, that we don't live in a small tribe, and that independent thinking is a tool we have that we can use. And why would we want to give that up? And it can hear a bunch of people saying one thing and still say, I don't know if they're right. I need to consider that myself. I need evidence. And so I call it like a ladder where, these two minds are always both active and both doing the thinking, but certain topics can really bring out, this primitive mind can start doing your thinking very quickly. And then other topics, the primitive mind doesn't have interest in it, and your higher mind is fully in charge. And I think we go up and down this ladder. The higher rungs is when you're thinking with your higher mind, and the lower rungs are when you're thinking with your primitive mind. But what I think I realize is where we are on this ladder is tied to the environment we're in, the social environment. So a group can have a culture, an intellectual culture that is very low rung. And a group can have a culture that is high rung. So when a group has a high rung culture, I call it an idea lab. And it's, you'll know when you're in one of these. It can be, by the way, a married couple has an intellectual culture between them, a group of friends, a company, a community like you have here. There is an intellectual culture. And when it's a high rung culture, ideas are not treated like part of people. They're not associated. They're experiments we're working on. So someone disagreeing with your idea is just saying, I don't think that experiment works. And you would then say, well, show me how, or whatever. Or you'd say, yes, it does. I'm pretty sure. I just tested it. Try to break it. And if you can't, then my idea stood up to it. If you can, oh, damn, like I was wrong. I need to improve this. And so you're always playing with ideas. You're always challenging each other. And it's not a fight. There's nothing negative. You can even get in a heated debate, but everyone's having fun, right? And in that culture, it's cool to say, I don't know about that, because that sounds intellectually honest. And truth is treated as something that's hard to get to. So it's a culture where you're going to find a lot of people saying, I don't know, or asking questions. And when someone does express conviction, like, no, this thing does not work. This is not a method that has worked in the past. If it turns out when people dig in that person's just saying that, they don't really know what they're talking about, they lose a lot of respect and trust, and people won't listen to them. So unearned conviction is not cool, right? Now, the opposite culture, the echo chamber, which is what we see in a lot of political discussions, but it can happen in scientific communities too. It can happen all over the place. We can just drift into it, is when it's the exact opposite. It's when the primitive minds in the group are kind of banded together to run the group culture. And so in an echo chamber, agreement is the name of the game. We all, of course, agree on this because we're good people. And the people who disagree, they're obviously the bad people. We can't stand them. They're the other. And we, and our ideas in this are part of kind of our bodies almost. And so when someone challenges that idea, it's like a fight or flight thing. And now the whole group will start talking about this person's, we don't like them anymore. They're out because they don't agree, right? They're not. So it's almost like the primitive minds band together to protect a set of ideas. And now all of these minds that can do so much to the human brain, it's incredible independent thinking tool. That's all shuts off, and these minds are now in a kind of they're cooperating to protect a set of ideas, the sacred ideas, and they'll do everything to protect those ideas. And that's a source of conformity. And no independent thought happens. And in an idea lab, the brains can connect together like neurons in a super brain. And that's when you can have these great scientific discoveries and you can invent technologies that no individual human could. You lose all of that emergent property and you end up with a bunch of brains that we're suppressing their independent thinking abilities to just all say, yes, I'm right. We're good. We're the good people. Of course, look how right we are. We're so right about this. We're good. We're right. They're bad. And you'll notice that you go to a dinner table and a dinner party and everyone's just talking about how much they hate the political side on the other side. And very quickly it's in that environment, we're all having fun because of course we're all the good guys. If you started to say, actually, I think they're right about this, it would kill the buzz. It would kill the fun. And people would kind of be like, I don't know. And it could turn, and then an argument is not fun. A heated argument is a fight, maybe a friendship ending fight. You're not going to be invited to the next dinner party. People will look at it and say, what an asshole. Like what that person was so like unpleasant. Ugh. Because all they were doing was just challenging ideas, but those are sacred ideas. So I think that given that our minds can go up and down this ladder and our groups can, it's really important to just have this framework in your head. And you'll notice when echo chamber culture is happening and you can try to change that or challenge it or remove yourself from it. Or if it's your family, and there's nothing, accept it and say, this is not a place where we're going to have any intellectual discoveries. Let me just not talk about politics with them. That's okay too. But just to have this awareness and see it for what it is, I think it can help you try to stay up on the high rungs. Now, of course, we see in the U.S. in the recent decade, politics has, maybe because of social media, whatever you want to say, has become very low rung. And there's been the low rung politics is always in competition, I think, more with high rung politics than, the right and left are actually in competition with each other. And I think you've seen the rise of low rung politics in a way that and high rung politics has gotten very quiet. And I think that's really bad.
Yeah. I wonder if high-rung politics ever existed or when. I think we sometimes idealize the past, right? But I often think when we look into the past, things were super controversial and people were at each other's throats, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you watch a presidential debate, though, from 1960, Richard Nixon and JFK, it is different.
But then
it's
when you had like the Vietnam War and people protesting outside.
Well, so I think here's the thing. I think that humans are humans, right? So there was always going to be this tribalism. But I think what you saw back then was that the tribalism was actually distributed through different layers. So on the lowest layer, maybe you have people are really concerned with because the parties were much more, there was a lot more overlap and there were factions within each party. The most conservative Democrats were more conservative than the most liberal Republicans, for example. And in each state, Republican and Democrat kind of meant different things. And so it was messier. And what you had is the Republicans in different factions sometimes hated each other more than they hated the Democrats. And if anything, that made both of them want to maybe almost partner with the Democrats against their enemy. So that simmered the national right-left thing. Then you also did have the national right-left thing, which helped unite the parties below. So it simmered when there was a national election, maybe the different Republican factions now can have some unity trying to say we need to win this big election. Meanwhile, there was also the international on the higher level. You had macro tribalism of the US and the Soviet Union. And that was a source of, maybe xenophobia as an ugly thing, but it was a source of patriotism, which united all of these factions. So it was there. It was just distributed in a way that I think didn't let anything get out of control. Now, the international thing has kind of dissipated. There's not really you could say China's becoming more of but it's going to take a while for it to crack through that America's obsession with tribal politics within itself, and the parties have gotten much less diverse. So the conservatives are all Republicans now, and the liberals are all Democrats, and there's almost like this conformity to have to stay on message. So they're all kind of saying the same thing. So you've lost this. It's all concentrated into this one layer of left and right are the good guys or bad guys or whatever, and that has brought out a bunch of our very childish qualities, and there's just this crazy. It feels like I'm watching just a bunch of middle school kids where like, we're the good team and you're the bad team. You're evil. Everything bad is your fault. Nothing bad is our fault. I'm like, are we adults? What are we doing? It's like, why are we talking like there's a pure good side and a bad side, and that like it's just so it's so embarrassing. like, and it shows like our species is incapable of unbelievable things, insight and wisdom and beautiful art and scientific discoveries, right? And we're also capable of the lowest level, most primitive, childish tribalism. I mean, how do you get the Holocaust? I mean, you can see where it comes from. It comes from this other side of us. And just like North Korea and South Korea, you see the same people, the same whatever, you see the same ancient traditions, but you have one government produces one totally different thing and the other. I think it's the same thing. The structure of the government produces different results, as we're all talking about here in Prospera. But I think the same thing, the structure of, the social structure of social media and the media landscape can just produce this monster collectively instead of this genius collectively.
Yeah. To me, I see a lot of problems arise from centralization and ossification of institutions, right? If there's one big pie of resources and the governance mechanism is, okay, one out of two big tribes either wins or loses, and then the other tribe screws them over, and the other tribe gets all of the resources for 4 years, or at least can decide where to go. That's kind of where you end up. All right, you want something that you care about, say, economic growth or pro-business policies. So you have to side with one tribe, even though you actually also want, better LGBT rights or something like that, and that's in the other tribe. But you're kind of forced, if you want something, to side with one team because only one team will win. So you have access to some of these resources that you could get you your goals. All right, so what is the solution to that? The solution is that all these resources aren't so centralized. And there should be a different kind of mechanisms or competitions how these resources are used, which is partly also the original idea of the United States, where you had like the states actually competing with each other and attracting business and sort of be able to offer alternatives if the lifestyle there or the tribes that you find in one state don't entirely match what you're looking for. So in a way, that's what we're trying to invigorate with what we're doing here, is provide people with an alternative and create kind of new tribes or societies. And you might have some, might have an impression to share of your experience in Prospera or some of the things that you've seen during this conference.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I love the original U.S. concept, the federalist, concept of these are experiments in government, and instead of saying I need to pick the blue team or the red team, you could say there's a blue team and a red team in 50 states, and they're all a little different. And the red team in this state, that's they're doing it right, and I want to go there. And even if only 1 in 3 people actually moves, because moving is annoying, there's a big flow and people can notice that. And other states say we need to be doing a better job. And maybe the blue team in that state says we're not going to challenge this because it's so popular. So that becomes an entrenched thing in that state. So I agree. I wish we had more of that. I think that a place like this can go a long way to bringing back some of that feeling of experiments in government. Think about startups or just all these experiments. What if there was only kind of, there was a grand governing, business authority who said you can start companies, that are like that have this mission, or this mission, because those are the rules and they've been in place for 80 years, and you're not going to see much progress, and it's because of the if anything is not optimized in a certain industry, some startup's going to come do it and take your business. So I do think this is a mechanism, and we can't have land to start new countries right now, new full countries, but this is a mechanism to actually bring some experimentation into a world that is totally saturated with sovereign states. But even just to tie it to the culture point, I mean, even just what you're saying is I need to vote for one of these parties, even if I don't love either of them, because I this is the thing I care about most, even though if that party is going to go again. Oh, right there, you're already the kind of, we need more people who are even thinking that way. Because what I think is much worse, because someone who's thinking that way is not attached to any party. You're trying to actually improve the country, improve your cause, and or just improve your own life. You just want to selfishly vote. That's fine. If everyone was selfishly saying, I want better streets in my town, I want safer whatever, I want investment in this, then that would be better. Instead, what you see is when the primitive mind takes over and it's contagious and it has this wave of a tsunami of primitive thinking has swept the country. You say, I might as well have blue tattooed on my skin. I am the blue team. And now when the blue team starts doing something crazy that goes against your supposed principles, you might not even notice. Now that's what you believe. And you're just blue team, and every single thing that the blue team says is good and true. And if they do a 180 4 years from now, you don't even notice these are the things that are good and true. You're like programmed. And that's why you have people, far left people in the streets holding up signs of the Ayatollah right now. Just because if something opposes the West and opposes the US, it must be good because the West is bad. And if something is done by Donald Trump, it must be bad. And so the enemy must be good. This is childish thinking. And so you have someone in the West, the left, feminists, holding up a guy who has created the most patriarchal, most oppressive to women society, maybe on planet Earth. You have, conservatives, American conservatives. I'm a constitutionalist. Donald Trump says something like, I think burning the flag should be illegal, which is the, antithesis. That's the whole point of freedom in America is it's a flag you can burn. That's why it's great. And if Donald Trump, he's done some great things. He's done some bad things, but he's really not very friendly to a very traditional conservative in lots of ways. He does a lot of things to violate conservative principles. But if you're so red that the red guy in charge says that, and now you say, yeah, we should burn the flag. No one should burn the flag. They should go to jail. There's no anchor there. There's no principles. They've all been thrown out the window and replaced by blind tribalism. So anyway, there's multiple problems, but I think first, I just want people thinking like you. Then we can start to say now when we have people that are voting for it, now we can say, how can we get better options for people who are thinking that way?
Yeah. You said something in the beginning and it struck me actually as something interesting that there's these things that we can actually agree across tribal lines are good things. So you mentioned the moon landing, for example. Everyone is like, hey, going on the moon is awesome, right? So that there was no anti-moon protesters or something like that. It was just like both the Soviet Union and the United States wanted to be first with this thing. And then there's other things that, whether there's sort of a tribal coding. So, vaccines were coded in like more blue or something like that. And sort of people on the other side were anti-vaccine, right? Even though, and how was it, or what's kind of the lesson you can draw from that, maybe for communication, maybe for how we do things when it comes to life extension and longevity, right? How can we place it as this? Because right now it does seem actually that it is more in the, okay, that's what the billionaires do and we don't like the billionaires, right? So how can we position it as something that everyone should want and that we should use some of these tribal instincts actually to sort of compete and see who gets there first and extends life fastest?
Yeah, it's hard because I think that if the moon landing happened today, with this current hyper-tribalized environment, I think that people who hated Richard Nixon would have been angry about the whole thing, rooting for the Soviet Union to win. I think so. And I think, I don't know if anything can make a current America that level of united in their patriotism right now. Maybe a serious threat. Maybe if we got, if there was a, attack, even then I can just picture people saying, blaming it on the president they hate and the other people blaming it on the country that did it. I mean, it's really bad right now. And there's mechanisms that promote it. I don't think most Americans are actually like that. I think most Americans are quite reasonable. I think it's that the people who are really tribal that have been elevated by social media, and now the traditional media is scared of social media. So now the journalists who work there are very tribal. So media and social media has indoctrinated a lot of people into this low rung belief. Those people are very loud and have been convinced that, all rules go out the window because our side needs to win because desperate times call for desperate measures. So there's no propriety. There's no, we can't legitimize those people. And they're very loud and they're sometimes violent. And the rest of the country's gotten very quiet and scared of them, I think. So I think the answer is, if Donald Trump announces today a longevity moonshot plan, I think you're going to see at best crickets from the media, not saying very much, mentioning it very quietly, along with critics say this about this thing. They say, but I think more likely what you'd see is a real actually concerted campaign to frame it as this is a way to pad billionaire pockets or something. And it's not actually, and scientists are laughing about this because there's no chance at this. And it becomes almost like a dirty word now, longevity on the left, where if you say that and scientists don't want to go into that because scientists are very often within left places and it looks really bad. And now people who fund it are kind of laughed at or at best or really, criticized at worst. That's what I think. Honestly, it's so polarized right now. And so I think the question is, because I do believe that the good news here is that, as I said, I don't think that all Americans are like this. I think that the campaign we'd see that I'm talking about would come from a very small amount of people. Most Americans would just love a longevity thing and they're not that political. So great. I don't love Trump, but whatever. I mean, this sounds good. That's most Americans. It would be a way to somehow... somehow reach, keep it as far as possible out of, this is a circular, because I'm saying keep it out of coding, and you're saying, how do we keep it out of political? Same with AI, AI safety, you get really worried. It's going to get associated with like the left. And now all Republican presidents are going to say, we're not, we're going to build. We don't believe in, this kind of over, and it's like, oh, we don't want that. We don't want that because now all smarts goes out the window on both sides, by the way, because now it just becomes we're going to defend it. No one's going to think with nuance anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't think I have an easy answer, but I think you're on the right track, is that it's very important that these missions can be not associated with one side more than the other. Maybe you continue to, as it becomes a bigger deal, you get investment from people that are known left and known right. You get you bring in celebrities to that are both coded on both sides, and you just continue to be very adamant about how we're not going to let it drift into and you stay very apolitical yourself. Only go to talking about politics as it pertains to achieving this mission, but there's no political ideology. The people have it and people will quietly talk. It's not publicly known here, even if so I think that it's the same thing with charter cities. You could very quickly imagine it becomes a Trump thing, and now suddenly the media is talking about it as the new colonialism. So everything has to be very delicate here. Once it starts, it's hard to undo it. So right now you're in a great place. Yeah, and it's insane to even be talking about this, because how non-controversial should longevity research be? This should be, if you just, it should be the cliche example of a non-controversial thing, because cancer research is non-controversial, but we can't somehow apply this. Everyone agrees curing cancer is a good thing. Everyone agrees fighting cancer is a good thing, but fighting for longer lifespan, it suddenly somehow it doesn't connect. And I think there's a lot of work to be done to tie it into these existing things. That this is just a fight to save lives for longer, and it's just fighting all the diseases together. So I don't know, but I think it's important.
I think the challenge is once you are dependent on some kind of political work or change, right? Because with charter cities, these are inherently political. You need a government partnership, so that government needs to come from one side. But then I think once you have that, in these cases, you need to engineer it so the other side also has a stake in it as well, right?
Yeah.
And I guess my conclusion for that with longevity is, okay, try to not rely too much on government funding.
Yeah.
Because that's when you get a lot of funding if you're willing to attach yourself to a political side. And then the other side can attack you.
And that's also when the other side can come in and cut off the funding.
Exactly.
Because they campaigned on cutting off this kind of spending from these awful people. And it's just nested within there. Yeah, I think that's, I think that's, if possible, that's smart.
Yeah. So, but I also agree with the strategy. You need to build the thing and give it into people's hands. Like, there should not be a political argument about, whether someone's cancer was solved or someone's rare disease or someone, is able to live much longer, right? It's just that person is that, and they have any political beliefs, it doesn't matter, right? So anyone should agree with better, more life.
I know. I think there's at some point going to be a moment when I hope longevity just explodes into the public consciousness as this important mission.
Yeah.
Right now, even, look at billionaires who they can buy everything in the world except that.
Exact time. Right?
They accept time. And even they are not putting money into this like they should be.
Yeah.
It's like there's this, there is this slow burn on, I think, when real longevity gains become a possibility, it's a new thing in a world where they've never been a possibility. Where anyone, the bad guy in all the movies, is the one who wants eternal life, Voldemort, and it's just there's a real set of philosophies in place where eternal life is not, and again, and the other thing is that no one in longevity wants eternal life. That's not what they're trying to do. They want to make they are trying to just increase health span and have people 100 be the new 70. But also, I think the moonshot people, what they want is just to make lifespan voluntary. And it's a choice. Bring it to it's a choice as opposed to when your body gives out. The people who like living to 80, they can still do that. No one's stopping them. You don't have to do any treatments. It's just giving people who want to live longer an option. It just should be so uncontroversial, but it's right now associated with something that's always been impossible. And so therefore it's associated with quacks and it's associated with narcissists and it's associated. And so there's a lot of PR to do. And I think a couple breakthroughs can help with that. But I think at some point it's just so, think about it. It's in the core of our DNA is, survive and reproduce. Don't die and reproduce. So this shouldn't be a big leap. We're not trying to reprogram anyone. We're trying to take the programming that's already in there and wake it up to, look, the thing you care most about is like literally being worked on. That's why I do think there's a lot of potential here for a huge shift.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one final question. So obviously there's different scenarios in the future. In 50 years, will things be better and how much better or even worse? What's the one thing, could be a technology or something that people choose to do, that would make it more likely that we end up in a better future? It could be something like AI because it gives us more intelligence. Could be longevity because it gives us more time to solve the problems, right? Or it could be, startup societies because they are the ones that are protecting technological advancement or progress. So if there's like one thing you could point at, what's one lever that could make a better future more likely?
My head goes to, I think AI is the technology to end all technologies. It's the technology that affects everything else. When you create a better nuclear bomb, it doesn't create better rockets or advances in curing Alzheimer's or whatever. When you create better AI, everything speeds up together. So then the second thought is AI does feel like it is just moving forward. I'm not worried about, we need to get more people trying to improve AI. Like that's happening. There's trillions of dollars literally invested. So now I think, okay, that's gonna happen. And what could go wrong? What could ruin? Because if that just keeps going, it solves all of our problems. What could go wrong is that we do it so quickly, we do it recklessly, and we end up killing ourselves or creating a permanent dystopia or just complete civilizational collapse. We're building something that is godlike power. We should do it carefully. So now I think, okay, so AI safety is the number one thing. And then I go, to connect the dots there. I'm like, okay, well, what is going to produce? Right now, there's 100 times more money in AI development than AI safety. So that's where I come into, we have an incentives problem here. And what can we, because when you do AI safety the wrong way, that's bad too. It can just stop progress altogether, or it can just concentrate power somewhere we don't want. So I just come back to, how can we bring the collaborative and smart brain that we can have potential to do onto this AI safety problem? And I think that does have to do with a cultural shift. It has to do with maybe places like this where you can experiment more freely, and you can come up with innovative ideas that don't have as much red tape. And maybe it has to do with people getting scared enough to start, insisting politicians do something about it. But again, politicians need to know what to do. So I think we need the smartest people in the world need to be thinking about what are good solutions here, what are good ways to do this in a way that doesn't create a harmful power of concentration or unnecessarily stop progress. So it's a long, rambly answer. I mean, that's where my head goes, is like, okay, if we can just figure out a way to make AI safe, then its development we will all be living as long as we want. I mean, I believe everyone will be healthy. There'll be no more poverty. I think, we'll have space colonies, and we'll have, abundant, endless energy. And I think that people will, so yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Tim, is there anything else you'd like to give our listeners on the way? Anything you want to point them at about your work besides the looking for the upcoming book that's coming?
I mean, the main thing I would tell your listeners is come visit here.
Right.
It's a vacation. This is a gorgeous tropical island with like dense forests and sloths and like blue-green ocean. I mean, it's great. And I just want more people to know about this. I think it's super. I think it's like Eric said. I think it is a slow and hard beginning step of something that could completely change the world. Not just change Honduras, not just change biotech, but like, really could become a new model that spreads and becomes a new paradigm that is all over the place, and is a way for a world saturated by nation states to have new government experiments.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Tim, and for coming on the show.
Yes, and thanks for building a longevity organization that's going to help me live more than 1 century.
We got a lot to solve to let the AI do its work to actually fix things for us. So.
Yeah, it's a big moonshot.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.